Hey there, what's up? In this video, I'm going to be giving you 10 tips to help you get the max battery life out of your Apple iPad Air M3. Let's go. Welcome back to the video. My name's Sergio. In this channel, I make life-saving tech videos. So if you're new here, feel free to subscribe and hit the bell while you're down there. All right, let's jump right to it. So I'm going to be giving you 10 tips in order to help you maximize the battery life of your Apple iPad Air M3. You can use all of these tips or just pick and choose the ones that you most like and implement them into your daily life so that you can help get the most out of the battery on your Apple iPad Air M3. Let's jump right in to tip number 1. So tip number 1 is to enable dark mode. So instead of using standard mode, it's good to use dark mode because the darker your screen at all times, the less battery that will be used by your iPad, so your iPad will last longer on a daily basis. How you do this is you go to settings. Here in settings, you're gonna scroll down to display right here in brightness. And here, just make sure you select dark mode. Okay, as you can see, we're in the settings here and everything's dark. And that is how dark mode functions, and it allows the iPad to use less battery on day-to-day operations. So let's jump to tip number 2. And tip number 2 is to keep the brightness of your screen as low as possible. So once again, let's go to settings, display and brightness, and here we can adjust the brightness of the screen. Okay, so it's only good to have it all the way up if you're in like extreme sunlight and it's too bright to see the screen of your iPad, but usually it's good to keep it around the middle here like this. And another thing I recommend is use True Tone, and Night Shift is also good because it will use warm colors at night. Okay, so just select scheduled here, select the time, and then select more warm colors for nighttime. This will not only help the battery by draining less because warm colors you take up less battery, but it will also help you wind down and fall asleep faster if you're using your iPad at night before you go to sleep. So moving on to tip number 3, and tip number 3 is to change auto lock. So auto lock is, when you're not using your iPad, when you leave it like this with the screen on, it will take about a minute for it to automatically black out. And, when the screen blacks out, it saves battery. When it's on like this, it's draining battery because it's using it to display everything on the screen. So how we do this is we go to settings, once again, display and brightness. And here in display and brightness, auto lock will be right here. It's standard at 2 minutes. So actually, it used to be 1 minute. On the iPhones, it's 1 minute. But on the iPad, make sure it's selected to the minimum amount, which on the iPad, as you can see here, is 2 minutes. So moving along to tip number 4. So tip number 4 is to enable low power mode. Low power mode is a mode which will limit the number of background transactions that are running on the iPad at all times, and it will definitely make a difference in your battery life. So how we do this is we go to settings, scroll to battery here on the left-hand side, and make sure that low power mode is enabled. As you can see, low power mode temporarily reduces background activity like downloads and mail fetch until you can fully charge your iPad. And as you can see, the battery logo up here will be yellow when low power mode is enabled. And low power mode is a big help in reducing your battery use. So moving on to tip number 5. And tip number 5 is to enable optimized battery charging when connected to the power for extended periods of time. Okay, so how we do this is we go to settings. Here in battery, we're going to go ahead and select battery health. And here you want to make sure that 80% limit is enabled. The reason you may want to do this is maybe you use your iPad and it's always connected to the power. So it's not good to always have your iPad connected to the power at 100% battery. It's recommended that when connected to power for extended periods of time, you limit the charge to 80%. So moving on to tip number 6. And tip number 6 is to, if you're ever going to store your iPad or not use it for extended periods of time, it's good to power it off and store it with 50% battery life or more. So it's not good to let your battery drain to 0 and just put your iPad away for months on end. That is actually something that is not good for the battery. and could potentially make it difficult to charge again, especially if it's stored in a very hot environment. And that brings us to tip number 7, which tip number 7 is to always use and store your iPad Air M3 in temperatures between 32 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 0 to 35 in Celsius. The temperature that you use or store your iPad makes a big difference as well for the battery. That's why when you take your device into like a hot room or you leave it in your car with the sun, the temperature gauge will show up and your device will automatically shut off. This is to help protect the battery. But either way, those extreme temperatures do damage your battery in the long run. So if you're ever going to store your iPad, it's good to store it in a cool, dry place. So tip number 8 is to limit your Bluetooth and Wi-Fi signal for when you're using it. So if you're not going to be using Bluetooth, it's good to just slide right here and just turn it off and turn it on when you're going to use it. Same goes for Wi-Fi. If you're not going to be connecting to Wi-Fi, you can simply just slide down right here, which is much faster, and just turn them off. Okay, this will drain your battery less because your iPad will save battery by not having to search for signals constantly. So let's move on to tip number 9. And tip number 9 is to keep notifications silenced, or at least to only show them when the screen is locked. Okay, the more notifications that you have activated, the more your battery will drain because it constantly has to be sending you reminders and notifications about different changes and things that are going on with each app. So you do this by going to settings, going to notifications. Here you will select show previews, and then here you can select never. And that's if you want to save the most amount of battery. Or like I said, if you do want to see notifications, but you also want to save battery, you can at least change it to when unlocked. So that when your iPad is resting like this, it's not going to be constantly, showing notifications and having to light the screen up and constantly drain the battery of your iPad. You only get the notifications when you're actually using your iPad. The notifications will pop up. And for tip number 10 is something that will also help you increase the daily battery life and overall long-term battery of the iPad. And this is something that you may or may not want to do, but it will help decrease the battery usage. And it is to keep sounds to a minimum or to keep the iPad silent. Okay, so when you receive notifications and or calls or messages, they will not be constantly making noises on the iPad, because also the iPad will use more battery to send sound to come out of the speakers of the iPad. So you can do this by going to settings, scrolling down to sounds, and then here just enabling silent mode. Okay, so once you enable silent mode, iPad will not play ringtones, alerts, and system sounds. iPad will still play alarms, timers, and music from audio devices. So silent mode will also help increase the battery life of your Apple iPad Air M3. All right, everyone, so those are 10 tips to help you maximize the battery life of your Apple iPad Air M3. Go ahead and destroy that like button if this video helped you out. Comment down below and let me know which one of these you will be using. And that's all for this video. I'll catch you in the next one. As always, peace.